Hi, everyone. This is Carson.
Hi, I'm Sean Robinson. We're Living the Line, and today we're going to be taking a look at some of the differences between the historic printings of Akira in English and the new one that's been put out by Kodansha USA. And Carson, you got the new one, which I think you probably have the better end of the deal, right?
Yeah, I got the box set and that's them up there. I've been wanting to talk about this, and this is the book that gave me the idea for this channel. Is I got these ones and was comparing them to the old Dark Horse. I had all six of the Dark Horse ones, and I was astonished at the difference. And then after working with you, my eyes are more trained for this stuff anyway. So I'm always griping about the books. But in this one, and so Tori's always mad at me, like, would you quit talking about Sean could do it better? And then in this one, I was like, look at the difference between the two. And I said, man, me and Sean should do a channel on this. So I've been waiting to do this ever since I came up with
Could
the idea.
she see the differences?
Oh yeah, I mean it's like, it's pretty obvious some of these things are just wildly different in these books. And so she was like, okay, I get it, but still I'm sick of hearing about it. It's like most of the time it's not that bad. Yeah, fair enough.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
the better something is, the more it affects it, right? Or at least the certain kinds of techniques. We've talked a little bit about this, but the finer the detail that somebody works in, and the sort of in further down into the page that they go in terms of attention to these kinds of fine things, the more plug-in that there is. If you're Mike Magnolia drawing with a double-sized Sharpie, the difference between fill in and not fill in is fairly minimal, because your line itself, the content itself, is so thick.
I'm pretty sure he uses a 0.3 micron at times too. Come on, give him a sec.
You don't, you don't.
I love Magnolia. We're not like,
I love him too. I'm not
yeah.
slamming it. I'm saying that there's an efficiency to the style that survives reproduction. You could take one of his drawings and photocopy it 4 times in a row, in successive photocopies, and you wouldn't see a hell of a lot of difference between number one and number five.
A hell of a lot of Hellboy difference. uh, so this is the first image that I saw, and Sean, you didn't have the Dark Horse. Sean had scans of most of the Dark Horse ones.
Yeah,
um
I had
I had taken these two after I got this is the Kodansha one, and you can see that even that is losing.
right.
It's still not a perfect print, but
Well,
it's compared to, this is just a photograph I took, because I had taken, when I got the Kodansha ones, I just took these to my local comic store and said, here, just take these, hopefully you can resell them. And I went back like 2 weeks later when I got the idea for the channel, hey, can I take some photographs of those books I gave you? And he's like, yes. But you can see this has an entire gradient in it in this panel
right.
that's absolutely gone to black. And then this was the panel that I really noticed. There's a whole like warehouse drawn back in there,
Right.
with a forklift and
A
a
truck.
truck and all kinds of details. And in this, it's just absolutely black except for that little bit at the bottom.
And that fantastic garage being deformed by his radiation, radiating power or whatever. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's like warping, like whoop. Yeah.
fantastic. One unbelievable, staff he had working with him. I forgot the name of the guy who did the main, essentially like the lead background artist, but
I
he had an
thought he did
incredible
it all
team.
himself. I thought he claimed he did it all himself.
Oh no, no,
Um,
no, no. No, there Otomo wouldn't have claimed something like that. He actually credited his people, and he was
okay. I
a
thought I heard
comics
someone say that.
a manga scholar. He actually just as an interesting aside, for instance, he hired somebody, Hiroshi Hirata, who was a fantastic mangaka who was really popular in the 60s and 70s and 80s. He had hired him to do the Akira logo in
Mm.
Japanese, which is this really tremendous calligraphic thing. He designed Hirata's one of Hirata's collections and stuff. Otomo is a really informed guy, and I think it really seems to me that he distributed credit where credit was due.
Yeah, I don't know where I heard something. I heard that recently. Sorry for
What?
that joke. Then I just heard.
Well,
But
it's funny when you're looking at that, you can tell how they did this. So when I'm always harping about publishers should keep all of their physical assets, that's exactly what happened here. So this is without a doubt 100% not scanned from the original art, which would have been a huge pain in the ass. This was scanned from the negative. And so what they did is they did a grayscale or color scan of the original photo negatives. And all of this extra detail is just because instead of, working from a print scan, they worked from the original element, and they were able to manipulate the element the way they wanted to. So these fine lines here were blown out in the original photography. So, something like that is not really recoverable from the negative. If it's not there, it's not there. But
if they scanned the original art, that would be recoverable.
Exactly.
And we know the original art exists because they had a big show of like every page, like in these vitrines.
Yeah, but the thing about doing it from the original artwork is that they would have had to patch basically holes in the tone, because the tone, as we talked about before, is on an acetate that is not, it shrinks over time. And so each of these pieces of tone, depending on how they were placed and how big they are and what type of tone they were, shrink. And so when you have artwork that's 30 or 40 years old, you've got gaps in the tone. And the question then becomes, well, is it worth it working from something like that? I mean, it's just a tremendous undertaking, which is not to say that it couldn't be done. But anyway, they've maintained their physical assets, the original photography, and they're obviously working from that.
Yeah, versus like Dark Horse was like scanning prints or something.
Well, no. So part of this might just be the way that it was printed. These Dark Horse editions look to me like they were probably done on a web offset press, and they're printed on newsprint. And so newsprint has a tendency to expand. Newsprint won't give you a really rich black, and if you want a rich black from a printing on newsprint, the amount of expansion that you get is just tremendous. And so here's the Dark Horse Volume 2 I'm holding up right here. It's perfect bound, as in glue bound. It's printed on newsprint. You can see that the paper has aged. It's got a yellow patina to it now, and the black coverage is fairly weak. And so it's possible that had they printed this on coated paper stock or something like that at the time, it would have looked just as good as what you're seeing now.
Okay.
So
I was just astonished at how different it is. I have a question too?
Yeah.
When I was rereading, I was actually surprised at how much of his line work looks what I call sticky or gummy. Like everything really, there's no gaps in between. It's like he goes back and really makes sure that it all touches, and I almost feel like he goes back and like colors it, will go in and like, color that part in, which I often really bothers me in art. He makes it work somehow, but I wonder how much of that too is just the like areas like this that look really gummed up and funky to me. How much of that do you think is just issues with the original negative?
It could absolutely be that way. So you get a certain amount of optical fill in when you're shooting something on a camera stand, even though those cameras were really sophisticated for the time. It doesn't really compare in terms of the optical sharpness you can get from a great flatbed scanner, like a really high-end Epson or something like that, or a drum scan or whatever. And so there is a certain amount of that. But to me, I mean, it just looks like a tool thing. I mean, it looks like he's using, what you might think of as like a rounder nib, more susceptible to those kinds of I mean, the nice thing about a round nib is that you get a lot of more motion, you get a higher degree of motion from it.
To me, it just looks like his style.
Right.
Because he will leave a gap like right there. And to me, that looks better. But then there's these areas where it just looks like he's going back over and noodling a little bit too much.
Right.
and that goes away. It's not as bad in the later volumes. Like for as good as he is out of the gate in the early volumes, um, I see less of that in the later volumes.
Yeah, it's
But he
interesting.
makes it work for himself.
He's he's a fantastic cartoonist, and it's funny. I mean, he had done serials before Akira, and he had also done lots and lots of shorts and stuff. But this, you can still see a huge leap in those early volumes. By the way, I have a Japanese collection of short stories by him that I believe have still unpublished in English.
Oh,
SOS.
that's too bad.
And it's all printed on coated paper stock, and you get a much better idea of what printing at the time could look like. There's super sharp. Everything is very super sharp. It's a very interesting book. You could see a lot of stylistic changes through it. I'll probably do a flip through video sometime. But some of them have that liquid sort of line that you're talking about throughout the entire thing.
Yeah.
And then
it makes it work though, because it adds a sense of grime to the artwork.
Mm-hmm.
Like I always call it sticky or tarry, because it looks like someone had a crack in the road and they filled it up with tar.
Right.
But then he makes it work for like the vibe of Akira, especially. I think it was one of the things I liked about and tried to mimic from him when I first saw Akira, and now
right. Well,
older.
And it's funny when you get the short story collection, from story to story, you can see him varying his tools and varying it for effect. Okay. And there's one that's clearly done with a crow quill. The entire story is crow quilled, and it's got just a much different feel to it, as you're indicating, than that sort of the sort of like liquid aspect goes away.
Look cleaner to me by the end, but still that has that filled in. Anyways, jumping forward to then volume 6, because a lot of the Dark Horse stuff looked good when I compared the two, but then when you get to this final sequence, like, holy crap, this is the Dark Horse one. It's just this white blob, and I always thought that was a cool ass image anyways. But then you see it printed like the way it was originally done, and there's all this tone in there that makes it look more like a brain,
right?
And this expanding explosion pushing into the city like has more body to it because of that brain-like texture throughout.
Right. And this was the thing that indicated to me that they actually, did this properly, and did like grayscale or color scans and adjusted to taste, because my guess with this would be that those tone elements were blown out, but not totally gone from the original negative. In other words, they would be recoverable by working from an asset you could actually adjust, as opposed to doing a 1-bit scan straight from the negative, which is just a horrible idea. Please don't do it.
This is the Dark Horse. I mean, right. Dramatic difference. And I think it helped my understanding of the end of the book. Like, it wasn't just an explosion. It was this like biomorphic brainy mass of the two of them kind of coming together. And like the end of the book is, I don't know, I don't want to esoteric or metaphysical in a way or something. And I think some of that was lost on me the first time I read it. Maybe just because I was younger, but I think in part due to the art. This one, you can kind of see it in the Dark Horse version.
Yeah, it's faintly
there, but it's really faint, and it shows up better. You get it just more crisp in the Kodansha one. And then this whole like 2001 Space Odyssey baby thing. Like, right. They didn't have any choice but to do it to where they could get this, but the impact and like the drawn look of it, where you can see it looks like brushwork. I don't think it is, because it's all dots. My first instinct was a drawn with white put over it, but it's all dots.
Right.
That's just totally lost and fuzzy here. So I was so impressed by the difference between the two, and that this was a really good look at, why this stuff matters.
Mm-hmm.
That,
Yeah. It's interesting to compare the Akira Dark Horse editions to other contemporaneous manga publications, especially the people who really got it right, which was Studio Proteus, the handlers that worked with a lot of stuff with Dark Horse. So Dark Horse is essentially the publishing partner of Studio Proteus. And if you look at Studio Proteus publications from the same time period, you see, I mean, impeccable reproduction. And part of that is, a big part of that is because that they insisted, Torrin Smith, the head of Studio Proteus, insisted that they have packaging that fit the artwork. He had him print on better paper. They insisted on getting like at size copies to work on the lettering with, and the books look fantastic as a result. And other things done at the same time like this, not so much.
Yeah, I mean, even on these things, like,
Yeah,
I don't know, they feel weightier here. Like even the line work feels more present. And then losing this entire thing, like you don't get a sense that it's emanating so much as like he's separated from this ball that ends there. It looks like an entity, a self-contained entity, whereas in this one it's like this radiating presence.
Right.
So man, I was just really astonished between the two, and we had to look at it eventually. I don't think we need to like break down and talk about it. Plenty of people have done the big breakdown of Akira, but
do people need us to say that Akira is fucking awesome and everybody should read it? I mean,
yeah, like I feel like there's certain things where it's just like enough other people have covered that, but
yeah, I mean, if you're not moved to pick up the box set by looking at a few images from that, I mean, I don't know what to tell you, man. This is one of the greatest comics ever made, and it's out in a fantastic edition that looks great, and hopefully it's going to stay in print. But if it doesn't, you're going to wish that you had that other version.
Yeah, my only complaint is the book cover design is totally wild, like wild colors and wild patterns, and then nothing's like lined up, so the outside to me doesn't sit on a bookshelf well together. And I tried to take off the dust jackets, because we all know I hate that, and it was just even wilder colors and patterns. Like, shit, I gotta leave them on there.
That's really interesting.
They're beautiful, hardbound, like really nice paper. You can see the print quality is fantastic. So yeah, absolutely get them.
That's interesting that you would go nuts with a designy cover, given how much great color painting there is in the series.
Yeah, it's really weird. Let me go get, I'll show you what they look like without the they're weird. I'll just grab.
Did they reinsert the chapter header illustrations too? That's another thing that made it that was cut out of the original run, is these one-page illustrations that started each chapter. You used to have to get them in.
I'm not sure, but they'll have a cover like the actual painted cover,
right?
And they flipped it. It's gone back. You read it, it's not right Americanized anymore,
right?
Yeah, but on the back they'll have stuff like that,
huh?
And then if you take off the covers, they're
okay,
like these, but then you put like, yeah. So I don't know. There's just tacky stuff like this. That's collectible. It's trying to, like, you've got his nice covers, but I mean, when you put like these on your shelf next to each other, it's just totally wild looking.
Yeah, interesting.
And then some of the, like, just from a design aspect, like the fact that these things don't line up, so it doesn't make like a consistent unit. I don't know.
Well, I would think that the original Dark Horse ones would drive you crazy. I often stare at these on my shelf from a distance. So the word Akira is spilling over onto the spine, which means that when you look at the spine, you have these uneven shapes intersecting.
Yeah, I think people are getting better at designing. Like we're gonna talk about Goodnight Pun Pun in a second. The colors are weird, but they're getting better at designing like the image that goes across the whole thing, across the spines. I think they're getting better at that. What are the pages that you're talking about?
Oh, they were originally, when it was serialized, every chapter had a still image.
Oh, no. If you buy the box set, they have the Akira Club
Ah,
book,
gotcha.
and that has the collection of all the book plates. But these on the back have these like crazy. They do have a lot of like, let's get all of the ephemera and put it on it. But yeah, these are totally worth having. That just, for me, as someone who doesn't like dust jackets, and then with the totally wild coloration on the spine, if you
Yeah.
take the dust jacket off, it's even more like on the shelf. But
um,
that's just me being OCD. That's not a knock on the book.
it's worth mentioning that when I started the Cerebus Restoration Project, uh, you know, one of the things that I really taught myself about, print, there are lots of technical manuals and things like that, but there's not a lot of information sort of for the layman about these types of things. And I really carefully studied the first volume of Akira, the Dark Horse version of it, and the very first Kodansha USA printing, which came out with a Barnes and Noble label on it. I don't remember exactly what year that was, but they had a Barnes and Noble special printing that was, sold for some ridiculous price. And I had both of these, and they're printed on completely different paper. But I could tell that the photography was, either similar or the same. And that was a real key, studying those two books side by side, as was looking at this short story collection, SOS, printed on a slick, printed on a slick paper stock, and really seeing like, oh, this is what tone is supposed to look like this, the sort of pre-digital book. I had this, pre-digital book that looked fantastic, and being able to really study it and really, get like a, primer essentially on what printing could look like for line art and tone. That was a real key for me. And in my estimation, I don't think this is ever necessarily going to happen, but in my estimation, that's the type of improvement that should happen with the Cerebus volumes. Like, you work with the assets that you've got, you make the best master it is, and eventually there can be a completely different edition that sort of treats the entire thing like the work of art that it is. Now, that being said, there are probably people somewhere who prefer a perfect bound newsprint volume. I don't know them personally.
Well, because it's like a nostalgic, like the first, like I really love Alan Moore's Promethea, and I really want the absolute editions. You can't get them anymore, and they were at some point going to do, because most of them are double page spreads, they were going to do like a Frank Miller 300 type of printing where it's the whole thing's on one piece of paper, and they should do that. And like all the tricky ink and stuff that they didn't use in the original books. But I had such a connection to reading that book issue by issue, even if I got that perfect like art book edition, I would keep the original issues because of that kind of connection to reading them at the time. I get that, but I think that's rare instances.
As I said on Twitter the other day, if people can, I see people having nostalgia for things like CRT, like monitors these days. So it's possible that you can have nostalgia for anything. Because if you're nostalgic for a CRT monitor or a cassette tape or newsprint, I don't know what to tell you, man.
Well, and actually, when we're gonna talk about Goodnight Pun Pun soon, I saw the Monbin episode of how on his Dead Demons Destruction book, which I already did a video about. I don't know if he did it on Goodnight Pun Pun, but he does digital tone, and then he purposely adds, he like purposely fucks the tone up digitally so it looks, he knows it's going to be printed really well, but he wants it to kind of look like the fucked up tone print of his childhood memories. So there's instances like that where you and me would probably be like, why does the tone look so bad? And he's like purposely adding some variation to it because it looks too mechanical to his eyes and it doesn't
Yeah.
hit that. So yeah,
you habituate yourself to all types of aesthetic differences, and part of this stuff has been, you know, training your eye for better or for worse, right? To be more aware of those differences. I had a conversation the other day with my wife about sound. You know, I'm a sound engineer. One of the only things that I do that I've actually been trained to do. And I, when you have spent a lot of time manipulating something, it aids in the process of being able to evaluate that thing.
yeah.
And you know, that's the reason that we always talk about like the difference between, like, you know, a critic who can draw and a critic who can't draw. Image manipulation, like doing pre-press or adjusting your own work or things like that, actually train your eye to see those differences more strongly, because once you've had the experience of that real-time feedback, you know, I bought a Prius back, I don't remember exactly what it was, 2003 or something like that, and it was the first time that I ever drove a car that had a real-time gas mileage feedback, where the early Priuses, you could see the gas mileage in real time on the right next to the speed indicator, and it trained me to drive in this, you know, fairly like conservatively accelerating fashion, because it kept me from spending, you know, more money on gas or whatever. And it's amazing how quickly real-time feedback can change your perceptual abilities.
Well, and this is like when I started working with Dave, he was like, hey, you know, Sean can teach you how to do this stuff, and then you can do it yourself. You won't need to rely on anyone else. And even when I watch your videos, you give these practical things. So like when you were talking to Jim, you were like, yeah, this looks good. And he goes, I don't know, it looks kind of weird to me. And I've it's something maybe we'll talk about in later videos, but all the technical advice that you give, I think you still have an eye for when you're using those tricks. When's it going to get the best result? I could know all of your tricks, but part of what I consider like you're the wizard is you have done in developing those tricks, like you developed them, you did the research, and so you've trained your eye to, and you've gone to the print shop and printed it out and done the tests and built that experience. And so some of that is like, we all need to know those tricks, but I don't think we can all expect that as soon as we know the trick, it's going to look as good as when Sean does it. Like we would all have to kind of go through that a tuning period and the experimentation and printing it out to get the precision.
Right, because if you're perceiving a need for something and then make the solution to it, then you got to think that there's some other, you know, you have a more holistic. I'm just thinking about this from a sort of brain development, like brain plasticity standpoint. It's sort of the equivalent to somebody who's never drawn at all, you know, tracing photos.
Yeah.
Right, because if you're missing 50 steps in the middle that all require hundreds of hours, or, you know, tens of hours of practice or whatever, you still get that same like flat triangle nose, little bulbs, you know.
Yeah, it's everything's too stitched together. I'm always forgetting his damn name. The guy that wrote the book about camera obscura. He's a famous painter. But yeah, the tracings that he did, and then he's trying to prove that him and Ong both traced. And it's like the Ong drawings just look way better, dude. I'm sorry, but you just don't get it. He's a great artist. He has great paintings, but he just doesn't get that aspect of it. So I think there is, like, you're technically have figured all this stuff out, but you have trained your eye in a way that, you know, I think a lot of us that are following along are still going to have to get some experience with that as well.
Well, I appreciate the vote of confidence. I would also say that if you're an artist who doesn't want to learn about all these things, don't learn about all these things. You know, you're under no obligation to do that. A musician is under no obligation to mix their own stuff. I would definitely not recommend that. You know?
But if you can be the guy who can do it all and really be in control, that's great. But
yeah.
For me, it was like, man, I don't want to learn how to do this. Like, I know Sean will work with me on it, and I know he's got the technical know-how that I could develop, but also the eye that it would take me he's spent 7 years developing. So let his eye take care of that, because I trust it. It's great.
Which is why I don't want to look at books sometimes, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think I've been thinking about this. We need like a motto for the channel, and it needs to be "Make better books."
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah,
I like it.
Because like Kayfabe, who's our inspiration, they have the read more comics.
Mm-hmm.
So we need something, and I think make better books.
Make better books. I approve of the alliteration, Carson.
Yeah. And then Sean can look at books. We can all look at books.
Right. Then I can look at them again. Let me know when it's safe to emerge from my hovel.
I will do that.
Or my hermitage.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for following along, and make better books.
You want to see all these books? Smash that subscribe button and the like button and the bell, and then you get them.